Andrew Conroy from Long Winter Studios. I just got a really interesting question from Dia on LinkedIn, and he's asking, he says, I've been working on my film reel as of late, and I'm wondering if you had some advice to someone who's animating in the game industry and trying to get into doing some film and VFX work. This is a super good question. It's a question that that I wondered in a certain point in my career. I think a lot of people wonder, how do you transition from working in games or any sector of the animation industry to another? In particular, game to film is common. I think it was, when I started 15 years ago, it was even more common to be using games as an entry point. And that was awesome, but the quality of games has really grown a lot, and so it has changed a little bit. The industry has definitely evolved, but this is still a super, super good question. I think it's something that we should talk about. So I can give you my experience. This isn't necessarily a perfect roadmap from games to film, but I can tell you what it was like for me and some of my thoughts. Okay, so it starts out for me in college. I really wanted to work in film. I always wanted to work in film. Through a kind of a crazy connection with an aunt that worked with a brother who was the brother of Bob Peterson. I got his phone number, and if you guys know Bob Peterson, he's a story guy for Pixar for a long time. Anyway, look him up if you don't. I had his phone number, and so I just gave him a call. I cold called him in the evening one time. I knew he was in California. I was in Chicago at the time. And I just called him up, and I was like, hi, this is, my name is Andrew Conroy. I'm an animation student, and I really want to know about how to become a feature film animator. And Bob says, he's like, well, I'm in the middle of dinner right now, but can I call you back? And it was just, it took everything I could as a college kid to even call, and so that was like really startling, but it's so funny. And I was like, well, I guess that's just, the awkwardness of being in college and trying to reach out. And so sure enough, I didn't know if I was gonna get a call or not, but sure enough, I did get a call about 45 minutes later. Bob calls me back, doesn't know who I am. So I explain who I am again, and we proceed to talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, and he just shares with me some of his thoughts, and that was so helpful. The advice was good. It was advice that I maybe heard before, but because it was coming from him, it really meant something. And so I thought that was cool. And his advice was kind of three things. So his first thing was, it's going to take time. Okay, so he shared with me a story of how it's going to take time. He worked for 7 years before he got picked up by Pixar, and so then it's going to take time. You got to keep at it. The second one is, while it's taking time, you got to stay hungry. Okay, so he said, keep passionate, keep excited, whatever that looks like for you. You got to stay hungry. And number three was, you've got to try. You got to try hard. So you can't just wait, and you can't just be consuming content. You also have to put in a lot of effort. And it's funny because those three things are so basic, right? They're so standard, but I think coming from him, for me at that moment, they had a lot of weight. And so, so we hung up the phone. I was super grateful for that time and that conversation. This was before Animation Mentor. This was before, you could get in touch with anybody. And so to cold call was the only way I had to be in touch with anyone, right? But that information was super, super good. Okay, so right out of college, I got into video games. I got picked up by Avalanche Software, Disney Interactive, right here in Salt Lake City. And I worked for them in games. I wasn't that psyched about games, but I tried hard. I learned a lot about mobility and walk cycles and how to make something feel cool. And that was, again, this is 2007. So it was a long time ago in game industry time. Like, a lot has changed in the game industry since then. Okay, and so after I worked on my reel there for about a year and a half, working with them, learning from the people that I was animating with, working on my demo reel, I got picked up by Blue Sky, and I went out there and I served a contract for 9 months before having to figure out where I was going next. But that was my foray into feature film. So it was through that time, kind of those couple movements, that got me into feature film, put film on my resume, and has been something that I've been doing ever since. So in order to get there, the biggest thing, there are a number of things that you can do, and again, this is going to look different for everyone, but You gotta try hard, you gotta give it time, okay, and you gotta stay hungry. So you gotta study, right? You gotta study cool work, and don't just study it like I watch a lot of it. Watch it hard, like watch it as hard as you can, you know? So like slow it down, freeze it, you know, frame by frame it. I was framing through 2D features, Lion King, you know, Jungle Book, which is a little bit outdated for spacing and timing even then, but like Tarzan. And I think one of the cool things that was really helpful for me too is I chopped up clips. So I took clips from Ratatouille, I took clips from that was a super cool one at the time. You know, Incredibles, I took clips from, you know, a couple Mickey Mouse shorts, things that looked awesome, and I just put them in a folder. And when I was struggling as an animator, I would pull that folder up, watch those clips, and just frame through. And whether I was, you know, polishing a shot that I just didn't know if it was there yet, I would reference it against those clips. And you see like, oh yeah, no, I see where I need to get better at this. Because, you know, you're holding up something great. And so you look at something great and you look at what you have and you can see the difference. And so then you just try to match, not match it like as a rotoscope reference, but just match it and feel and maybe how many frames they did, or where they padded something, or, I mean, you just learn a lot from that. And so comparing but it's scary. It's real scary to hold your work up to such high work because you're gonna feel bad about yourself. You're gonna feel bad about what your work looks like, and that's okay. You know, you have to admit that you're learning and that you're a beginner, and that it's gonna get better. But the only way that it's gonna get better is to see the difference between who you are as an animator and who they are as animators. So don't be scared. Don't be scared to feel bad about what you're doing. That's a great tip. It's okay. You're gonna feel a little bad. It doesn't reflect on who you are as a person, and it doesn't even reflect on where you'll be as an animator. In fact, feeling bad about your work because you're comparing it to something good is good if you're learning from the good thing. If you compare to something good and you just think bad thoughts about yourself and then get discouraged, then that's not helpful. So you want to look at something good, you want to match it, and you want to move forward, right? So then some big differences between games and film. All right, so some big differences. Obviously, story plays a big role in both, and it plays more of a role even now than it did before, back when I was in video games. But in film, you've got to have a sense of the emotional arc and performance of the character, as well as physical nuances of the character. You're worried more about being on model, those types of things. Whereas in games, it's much more tactile. Like, you're worried about how something feels when it moves, when a player uses the action, and those are both super interesting spaces to be. But yeah, they're different. They're different. So in film, you want to be thinking about the emotional arc. You want to be thinking maybe about unique mental moments that are happening in the character realizations. So you want to be showing what's happening in the brain, and telling the story not just of what the character's doing, like they're at the grocery store shopping and they can't find the product that they usually like, so they're becoming frustrated. Like that's cool. But you want to show the story of their thoughts. You want to show the story of their mind and of their emotions as well. And so you want to be aware of that. So unique performances play a big role in that. Coming up with interesting observations of humanity, super important. And displaying those through your animation, it's really cool. Those are things that I've sought out. Again, that's my kind of style of feature film animation. Now, that being said, there are a lot of feature film animators who are super different than me, right? So on one side, you've got the creature side. The other side, you've got this crazy loony, whatever Sony's doing right now, you know, all the cool stuff over there. And that's a totally different look. And I tend to be kind of in the emotional performance based. I like the feelings, so I tend to be in that space. I do go into both of those other ones, but I tend to be more centered on that emotional, like, feeling space. So convincing performances, things like that. And I do love blur frames, and I love smearing stuff around, but I also love like making sure that the weight feels really cool and really good. And so those are 3 kind of different spectrums of film, and I think you'll find yourself in one of those 3 spaces. Definitely, I guess, just more drawn to one of those 3, and that's super awesome. So kind of lean into that, and let your reel show it. Okay, so the next thing, and this is interesting. So in film, you have more time, and that's a tricky one. So you have more time to do a shot. But you don't necessarily have enough time, if that makes sense. So you have more time to do a shot, but you don't necessarily have enough time. Okay, so what that means is you might be assigned a shot. In a game, it's quick, you gotta get through it, blah, blah, blah. In commercials, it's lightning fast, it's finished before you're even started, And in film, you have more time to sit on it and think about it, but you don't have that much time. You don't necessarily have enough time. So you have to think super hard, right? You have to polish the shot, execute it, polish it, have good ideas, polish it up, and then if it's not cool, then that sucks, So you've got to get that shot to be cool. So you have enough time. You have more time, I should say. You have more time, but you don't necessarily have enough time. You don't necessarily have enough time to like dilly-dally around, and you don't have enough time to get it wrong too much. Okay, so you've got to make interesting observations, accurate character observations, accurate emotional observations, and you have to do those things kind of like first go. Maybe it's not always first go. Sometimes you get, things mutate and production timelines change and director requests are subjective and all that. But you need to make sure that you take the time to make it extra good, okay? So it can't just be about the subject. So it can't just be woman goes into a grocery store, struggles with what she wants to purchase, pick something up. You've got to be able to show in an interesting way what that was like for her, or whatever your shot is. It's just a random example. So you got to show what that experience was like, and you've got to show it in a unique way, in a nice way. And the best way to do that is to go to the grocery store and watch people pick up, cereal or graham crackers or something. I don't know, whatever. So you've got to make good observations. You've got to make thoughtful observations, and you've got to make those both in the movement and in the character's performance. So that being said, you can see it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, you have more time, but you don't necessarily have enough time to do it wrong. So one of the things with games is they'll rush through the animation, polish it up, make sure it's really polished, it looks great. If your work doesn't look like it can fit into a film, it probably won't. So polish it up. Okay, so the last thing about moving from games to film, and really from anything to anything. So let's say you even get into a film studio, but you're not into a great film studio, or you have big aspirations. Okay, there are a couple things I want to tell you. The first thing is you can totally do it. Okay, so I grew up a kid in the middle of nowhere town. The idea of working in movies was insane. I couldn't even say it out loud until I was like graduated from college. It was like so scary. It seemed like such a big deal. I think it's more obtainable visually now, but maybe it's not, I don't know. I'm not like 18 anymore. So, you guys will have to tell me, I guess. So, is it still scary? I'm sure it's still scary, right? So, it was scary for me. I couldn't even talk about it. I couldn't even think about it in like a serious way. And so, that was a big deal, just saying it out loud and moving into it. But I just want you guys to know, like, you can do it. You can totally do this. It's gonna take hard work. It's gonna take dedication. It's gonna take thinking. So you have to use your brain. You can totally do it, You're gonna have to make some personal sacrifices at this time in life. Now, you don't have to make personal sacrifices necessarily forever, for on and on and on. You just have to make them for now. It's totally worth it, okay? It's totally worth it. I know there's been some press, some videos of like the animation industry isn't what I thought it was. Animation industry sucks, but it's still okay and all that stuff. Look, like, it's a cool job. This is a super cool job, but it's a job, and we'll talk about that more later. That's another video. So Dia, thanks for sending the question. I hope this has been helpful. For all you guys who are watching, I hope there's some good information in here. There's a lot of good information given to me, so I'm hoping that maybe I can give some of that back. If you guys have more questions, drop them in the comments below. You can shoot me a message on like LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. Just send it to Long Winter. I'm always there. So till next time, guys.